With the invasion poised 20 years ago, it was apparent that Iraq's army would not be able to withstand it, and that the best option for Saddam and those around him could be going underground.
The General Defense Intelligence view is that they're incapable of conventional military resistance. So defence by unconventional means is now Saddam's best option. This might include releasing biological weapons, but his other main option is for guerrilla resistance.
And indeed, a few months later in Fallujah, the Sunni insurgency began, an angry backlash by those displaced from power.
Fallujah's pretty hairy. Every time we go down there, something's always happening. There's gunshots or RPG fire. 2
rocket-propelled grenades were fired at the compound. After heavy American return fire, the engagement is broken off.
Ceasefire! Ceasefire!
And indeed, the Islamic State had its first incarnation 16 years ago, when it was defeated by the surge of American troops into neighbourhoods like Dura in Baghdad.
And would it be a good result or a bad result if you didn't pull the trigger on that one today?
I'd say it's a good result.
But violence on this scale was only palliative, and the spectre of IS militancy remains to this day in Sunni areas of Iraq. And while America pinned its hopes on elections, visiting the parliament in Baghdad, one soon learnt that those undermined national unity rather than solidifying it.
Unfortunately, although we had free elections, but people voted on sectarian and ethnic lines because there were not developed political parties.
So what about the majority, the Shia Muslims, who came to dominate the Iraqi state after 2003? Here too, there were unintended consequences.
Could we speak to the shift commander, please?
On the streets of Basra, we discovered even in 2005 the degree to which infiltration by Iranian-backed militias undermined British troops trying to secure the city.
Do you arrive unannounced?
Yes, we do.
Why is that?
For security reasons, it's purely that.
Your own security?
Yes.
So there is an issue of trust?
There is an issue of trust with some elements.
After the American withdrawal, Iranian influence increased further, and the perception grew too that Iraqi security forces, like these we filmed in Dura in 2014, served a Shia or even Iranian interest, and that underlined that America had created a vacuum that Iran was keen to fill. And what about Britain's role in this? Having entered Iraq in part at least to demonstrate alliance solidarity with the US, Britain tried to make Basra and the south a showpiece.
We want the public to think and feel safe. Every time they see the Iraqi soldiers go out, we want to get rid of the old regime, bring the new Iraqi army onto the streets and give them protection and safety and reassurance.
But while the US surged troops, British attempts to combat Iranian-backed militias in the south were half-hearted and were eventually abandoned altogether when British troops were withdrawn to the city's airport. What happened in Basra was, as the British gave up the fight against Shia militias and Iranian influence, American senior officers took a more and more dim view of UK operations, precisely the opposite of what Tony Blair had hoped to achieve by committing the British military to Iraq. And on the grander scale too, the Americans, by empowering Iran and touching off a lasting militant Sunni insurgency, did the opposite of what they'd intended. It was intervention on a dramatic scale, and while it destroyed Saddam's Ba'athist state, the struggle to define a new Iraq continues.